I actually went to culinary school with a friend called Jesus who lives in Beverly, and he had a dozen chickens and they all had chickens and he ended up with way too many chickens. So we did the right thing and helped him out and took a few chickens home. Hey, my name is Corentin. I'm the pastry chef at Butter, and today we're going to make traditional English scones. My mum's English, half of me is English, and when I was a kid, my mum would make scones and this is exactly what she would make, so they've got a place for me in my heart. This is a pretty basic scone recipe. It's the English fluffy kind. I really like the Kiwi Cafe cheesy, like gritty scone, but this is the kind of soft and fluffy kind, but we're going to layer it with some garlic butter and some herbs just to give a bit of a savory twist to the recipe. So I've got flour, sugar and salt and baking powder, which I'm just going to whisk together. It means we don't have to sieve everything together to incorporate it, and the baking powder will spread out evenly, so we'll get a nice even rise. And then we're just going to rub the butter in, which it's cold butter that I've cut into smaller pieces. Basically, the smaller pieces you cut it into, the less work you have to do with your hands. This will take a minute. Just take your time, crush the bits between the flour. Claire Saffit's from Bon Appetit actually has a good tip. You don't have to incorporate the butter fully, it just needs to look like all the flour's been touched. So when all of the flour looks a little bit yellow like butter, you know you're ready to go. And a few chunks don't matter, it's going to give us some nice air pockets in the scone. I don't know, it's kind of a catchy, simple name. I know I wanted something that people could remember, because my name is Corentin and no one knows how to spell it or remember it. So I figured if that's my name, I may as well have a business name people can remember and make it really easy for them to spell. So I just wanted it to be really simple, and it's kind of the posh part of bread and butter, and I like my things to be just a little bit nicer than average, I think. My first memory of eating scones was when we got snowed in France, and which actually used to happen quite a lot, but it would be just a classic day. We were really young, I think I was about 6 or 7, and I was stuck at home with my brother, and we used to fight a lot, and Mum didn't know how to entertain us, so she showed us how to make scones. Her scones are great because they're the scones that Mum makes. They're not the best scones in the world, but they're the scones that my mum makes, and that's why I like these, because they are easy to make and they remind me of what Mum's scones are like. So the goal here is not to work too long on this. You want to crush the butter as soon as you can, because if it gets warm and it melts, we're going to lose a lot of the little air pockets that the butter is going to create when it bakes in the oven. So don't try and spend too long, and again, make sure your butter is nice and cold. You can actually see here there's a bit of flour on the bowl. That's what white flour looks like, and all of this flour is pretty yellow and sandy. So I know I'm ready to go, even though there's a couple of big chunks in there, but I'm not going to stress about it. So the next step is to incorporate the milk, which again is cold. We're trying to keep everything relatively cold. Keeping things cold is going to stop the butter from melting straight into the dough. And if the butter melted into the dough, we'd get more gluten development, and it'd be more like bread than a nice fluffy scone. So I'm just mixing the liquids into the dry. And when I feel like it's mostly together, I just tip it out onto the counter. And I do a lot of stuff on the counter. I like using the counter because you can only put so much in a bowl, but a counter is endless. Now, my mum always said never to knead the dough or to overmix it, and most people will have told you that. But actually, I've done a little bit of research, Mum. And if you do knead it, you do develop a little bit of gluten like you would when you are kneading bread, and that's actually what's going to hold a bit of air into this mixture and make them nice and fluffy. So I'm just going to knead it until it's smooth. I don't want all these little dry bits and these lumps. I'm just going to get rid of them by kneading. We're going to let this rest for a full hour before baking, so all the gluten that's developed is going to get a chance to relax so that the scones don't become so tough and they will kind of proof. I feel like I'm not the best person to explain all the science stuff because, I don't know, I just follow the recipes I like. I'm not really good at, I don't know too much about what goes on behind the scenes. This is pretty smooth, it's a pretty even dough, and I'm just going to let it rest for 10 minutes before we roll it out and shape it. while the scone mix is resting for the first 10 minutes, I'm just going to do a really rough, quick garlic butter. So I like to grate some fresh garlic straight into about 50 grams of butter, it doesn't matter. The beauty of this is we'll use it to bake the scones with, but we're also going to use it to eat the scones with. So I've got a clove of garlic and there's a bit of thyme and parsley, freshly picked from the garden. I'm eyeing this all up. I do about 50 grams of butter, a clove of garlic, and then as many herbs as I think looks nice. I'm just going to melt it. I'm not going to cook anything, just melting it down so that we can brush it onto the scone mix. Cool, I'm going to roll my scone mix and I'll show you how I put them together so that we can bake them and they rise nice and even. So just a bit of flour on the surface. You can be pretty generous with this, and I'm just going to pick the smoother side face down and roll it to about 1 centimetre thick. And I'm trying to get a rectangular shape. It doesn't matter what kind of measurements they are. Do you know who showed you how to make hand-pulled noodles? Lived with us quite recently and left quite a few things behind, including this lovely rolling pin. So thank you, Juno. So the butter's melted, and I've set it aside just to cool down a little bit. We don't want it hot, but warm is fine, and it's got all the garlic and the herbs in it. I'm going to use about half of it and spread it on top of the scone. So I'm quite generous with this, and you can see there's chunks of herbs and stuff. I quite like that. It's going to get stuck inside the scone and all turn out quite lovely. Right, and I've kept the rest for later. So the trick here is to get as square as possible of a dough. So I'm going to cut it in 3 pieces. And then I'm going to stack them and roll them out again. And that actually is going to create a seam once we cut out the scone so that there's a nice split in the middle when we bake them. So I'm cutting straight down the middle and in half again. And I'm going to stack them butter side up and make a square-ish shape. Now that we've got a big patch, I'm going to roll it out a little bit thinner again and try and get about 2 centimetres of height on that. So we're cheating a lamination. It's just going to create a really thin layer of butter so that when we've cut it and we bake it, it's going to have that nice little natural split down the middle. So you can cut this into circles, which is the more traditional shape, but I don't like the waste. If you did cut circles, obviously just re-roll the scraps, but then you'll get a manky scone, which is fine because I usually just eat that one and serve the rest. Now that we've actually made the scones, we're going to let them rest for a full hour so that the gluten fully relaxes, and it means they're going to rise nice and even. I'm just going to brush a little bit of butter. I bake them straight on the tray because I don't like to use baking paper if I don't have to. And also the contact with the tray is actually going to make the bottom nice and caramelized and golden as well as the top. Just to get a nice golden top on the scones, I'm going to brush an egg yolk on there before I bake them. So pretty straightforward. Keep the egg whites, make some meringues for dessert if you want. Good, thick brush. We're really lucky our yolks look like this. It's because we've got chickens in our backyard who make the eggs for us. I really like chickens. I've always wanted chickens, but our friend, I actually went to culinary school with a friend called Jesus who lives in Amberley, and he had a dozen chickens and they all had chickens, and he ended up with way too many chickens. So we did the right thing and helped him out and took a few chickens home. So I've got a decent egg yolk layer on all of these. I'm going to let them rest for a full hour, but you don't have to. They come out nice and even when you do, but if I've got friends coming over, I just bake them as soon as I want to. Now the scones have rested for an hour, I'm just going to put them in the oven at 180 degrees for about 12 minutes. The timer's gone off, it's been 12 minutes and the kitchen smells delicious, so I'm going to say the scones are ready. They're going a bit crazy, but I kind of like that. So we got the split that we wanted. I used a little bit much butter. You don't have to use any butter at all. You can actually just stuck. That's my English coming through. You can actually just stack them without the butter layer in between, and it's going to give you still a nice tall and fluffy scone. And obviously if you don't use the garlic butter that we made, you're just going to get a classic sweet English scone that people would traditionally have with clotted cream and jam. I would normally let them cool for a little bit just so that they've got the time to retain the moisture and cool down. But obviously we've created these really nice splits, so you can choose how you split your scone. I like to split them open and spread a little bit extra of this garlic butter that we made. But like I said, if you just omit the steps of the garlic butter, you'll have a nice traditional English scone that you can have with jam and clotted cream or creme fraiche. Time to eat. That's good. They're soft, they're fluffy, a little bit crispy on the outside. The garlic comes through in a really nice raw garlic way because we didn't cook it in the butter, and there isn't heaps of it, it's just enough for it to come through. If you want to give these scones a try, let us know how you get on and subscribe.